Today, the case for Wi-Fi first using the Comcast Xfinity Wi-Fi network. And my guest today, a wireless industry veteran, Narasimha Chari, has studied this in detail, and we'll ask him about the results right after this short message. All right, welcome back, everybody, and Happy New Year to all of you out there. My name is Claus Hetting, and I'm your host of Wi-Fi Now TV, the show that brings you all the great stories and not least all the great people from across the wireless industry, specifically, of course, the Wi-Fi industry. So today, we'll be talking about one of my favorite topics, I should say, and that's Wi-Fi first mobile services. And if you don't know what that is, stay tuned, and we'll tell you about that in just a moment. My guest today is wireless industry veteran Narasimha Chari. He has studied to what extent Comcast Xfinity hotspots may be used or not to make up the outdoor layer of a Comcast Wi-Fi first mobile service. So Chari's going to come on here in just a second. And but before that, actually, I want to make sure that you know that we're taking Wi-Fi Now, the expo and conference, to the great city of Washington, D.C. this April 18th to 20th. We were there last year and we had a great time there. So we're going back to DC in about 4 months' time. We're already open for business, meaning that you can already reserve your ticket. And if you're interested in exhibiting or some other role at Wi-Fi Now DC, you better be quick because we're filling up fast. So for all the details, go to wifinowevents.com/USA. And if you have any questions, drop me a line at klaus@wifinowevents.com. So that's it for my usual pitch. All right, so will Comcast's Xfinity Wi-Fi network be of any use to Comcast for this Wi-Fi first type service? To answer that and a lot more, my guest today is Narasimha Chari. And just before we get Chari on, I just want to give a proper introduction to him because he was the founder and chief architect of Tropos Networks back in the early 2000s. And today, Chari is the founder of DropFi, a stealth mode company that we can't say much about yet, but we might be able to get Chari back at some point to talk about that because I think that's Wi-Fi related as well. Chari, welcome to the show. It's great to see you again.
Thanks, Klaus. Very good to be with you.
Good stuff. So let's talk a little bit about this impromptu test that you did of the Xfinity Wi-Fi coverage. Now, it's a bit interesting here because what you actually did was you were sitting in a train and you took the Caltrain, to be specific, from San Francisco all the way down to Redwood City, which is a distance of, 30 or 40 miles, and you did the test from that. What were your findings, just to give us an overview?
Sure. Happy to do that. So just to back up for a second, so I've always been intrigued by this Wi-Fi first concept, which is the idea that a mobile operator can offload a good chunk of the usage onto Wi-Fi networks and then use cellular just as a backup. And on the surface it seems very compelling, but that there are possibly a lot of hurdles in making that happen well. And I read about Xfinity and their ability to their attempts to build out a Wi-Fi first model using their residential subscriber base primarily to build out the coverage using an inside out model. And I was curious how well that worked as well. And so I live in the Bay Area, and I took the Caltrain one day from San Francisco down to Redwood City, and I decided to perform some tests sitting inside the train, just looking at the raw signal level from the Xfinity Wi-Fi access points as I was taking the train down the peninsula. And it was interesting, though. It was a ride of about 40 miles or so, and I logged about 800 access points, of which about 120 were outdoor access points. And the signal level and measurements were kind of interesting. The median signal that I saw was about minus 65 dBm. There was about I would say, which is actually reasonably impressive. And at over 90% of the locations, the signal strength was better than minus 80 dBm. But then again, it was only above minus 60 at about 20% of the locations. So it's A reasonably good signal. I would characterize it as usable. Definitely not something that you could build a Wi-Fi only service around. But if you're trying to build a Wi-Fi first, where you have the ability to fall back to cellular when the Wi-Fi is not great, then this actually makes a lot of sense.
Right, exactly. And I'm like you. I'm fascinated about having Wi-Fi and mobile come together is something that we've been talking about on the show with various guests for a long time. So, but this bodes well, actually, in many ways for Comcast using their Xfinity network. And the remarkable thing here is it's, of course, a combination of home spots and public Wi-Fi hotspots. But if you look at the home spot part, which is the biggest chunk of it,
yeah.
What's actually happening here is that, as you said, it's in a house or in some sort of residence. It's beaming towards the outdoors and then into the Caltrain where you're sitting, and we're still getting quite a good signal level, for the best part of the journey, right?
Yeah, no, I was very skeptical going in because for precisely that reason, which is that, the same reason why outdoor hotspots have trouble penetrating indoors is why I would have thought that, home access point signals leaking outdoors would not really make it all the way out. Mm-hmm. But it seems as though it's mostly working primarily because Comcast has such a high density of, subscribers. Mm-hmm. There are so many access points that
Yeah, exactly. I think Kyle is going to put up a couple of the slides that you generated for us just to show your route. And there's also a picture of the Xfinity Wi-Fi Bay Area coverage map. That's what you provided for us, where we can see there are holes in the coverage. But once you get past Millbrae, which is I guess about around the airport, yeah, it's pretty good coverage from a Caltrain point of view. All the way down to Redwood City, which is remarkable. We're going to put those slides up for people to see. So let's talk a little bit, Chari, about what can we use this for. So the mobility aspect is complicated in this case because Wi-Fi has always been difficult for mobility. But maybe comment on that a little bit. I mean, some additional technology wouldn't be needed, obviously, on top of this to get all this to come together, right?
Right. I mean, I think I did the tests while mobile, but I guess you could use the tests as a way of looking at what the signal coverage actually looks like over a wide area. Because I was only looking at the signal strength, to some extent, it paints a bit of a rosy picture in terms of how well the connections behave while mobile, which is really not very well. So I was testing actual connections and associating and authenticating and then passing traffic. I was just passively looking at the signal strength.
Yeah.
In reality, of course, as a user, when you try to connect to these hotspots, for fixed nomadic use cases, it usually works pretty well if you're inside a cafe or you're at home and so forth. But there's often also a lot of frustration because sometimes your mobile device tries to connect, it sees a signal, it tries to connect to the SSID, and it looks like it's connected, but there's actually no traffic that's able to flow, and it's quite frustrating. And so there are a lot of these connection management issues around, is the device connecting to the right access point? Is it handing off correctly between access points? Does it do a good job of deciding when to fall back to cellular? Those are all things that I think need a lot more work.
Yeah.
I would maybe say that this is not yet at the point where I would think of it as a mobile solution for when you're driving around and streaming Spotify in your car. But definitely for fixed nomadic use cases, it seems like the signal in most places is good enough to do basic stuff.
Right. So some of the things that would possibly or probably improve on or create a proper service for Comcast as an MVNO in this case, that, to combine Wi-Fi and mobile, is to have the right kind of connection manager in there. And this is also a subject that we've covered from many different angles on this show. So presumably that would make a big difference, not just the finder, because a lot of companies have that, but something that allows for a seamless transition between the different carriers and so on. I mean, that would be in the cards, presumably, if Comcast is going to go ahead and do this, right?
Yeah, I would think so. I mean, I think that's one of the big gaps, and I'm surprised that it hasn't been something that's been integrated into the mobile operating systems because this is such a common problem. It's been there since day one, since smartphones appeared, which is you have Wi-Fi links and you have cellular links, and your phone often does a really terrible job of deciding which one to connect to at any given point of time. And it often does a terrible job of switching between them and picking the right access point, and they don't do basic things like make before break.
Yeah, right. And you and I talked about this before. It's actually not that complicated a problem one should think from a device point of view to fix it. But for some reason, it hasn't sort of systematically happened. I mean, there are companies out there that provide device managers of one sort or the other. It's not been systematically addressed. Possibly, I mean, I'm guessing here, but possibly maybe because the carriers have had no particular desire to do so, I guess. But what's your view on why it hasn't happened?
Yeah. No, I think that's probably a big piece of it. And I think maybe that's where Comcast or some of these bigger cable operators come in, which is that they have the motivation as well as the ability to move the industry in a forward direction and solve some of these problems. And maybe it's by doing connection manager application on the phone, coupled with more intelligence inside the network. For example, admission control at the level of access points, maybe even intelligence further back in the network.
Right.
But clearly that's a set of problems that needs to be solved.
A set of problems. And I also just want to add that there is a lot of Wi-Fi technology proper in the pipeline with 802.11ax. I was just listening to a webcast by one of the big chipset providers just a couple of weeks ago about all the things that are in the pipeline with that actually should solve a number of problems that people have been nagging us actually for a long time. For example, OFDMA and the uplink direction and so on. Yeah. And there's all kinds of pieces of technology that are coming together in Wi-Fi that should help, right?
Yes, definitely. There's a lot of movement within the standards. My general sort of take on 802.11 standards is that they tend to go after big problems in very common use cases. So often, use cases like the enterprise or the home get a lot of priority, but in terms of solving the problems of what happens when you're a Wi-Fi client that's moving on a train, I don't necessarily think it's a high priority for them. So they may or may not do a good job fixing it, or the people who are building the devices may not actually implement those things in the right way, tune it.
Right. So let's go back to Comcast for a second. And for that matter, I think the same story essentially applies to Charter. Now, I know you were measuring the Comcast Xfinity hotspots, but Charter has also announced that they want to launch an MVNO, and they haven't said there's a lot of details about it, but presumably Wi-Fi is going to be part of that as well. I mean, it would seem to make sense. Right. But so what are the other I should say challenges that cable providers are going to face with this kind of convergent service? Are any other things that you can identify from your study or otherwise, Chari?
I would say, I think, the usability of the service is sort of the most basic level at which the problem needs to be solved. It needs to be reliable. I think the concept of Wi-Fi first seems to imply that you maximize how much you offload to Wi-Fi, but maybe a better place to start is to focus on delivering a really great user experience. And if that means that you're on cellular most of the time, but you use Wi-Fi when it makes the most sense. So for example, home or you're at work or you're in a cafe and the signal works great, then sure, shift it to Wi-Fi, and most of the usage is going to happen in those kinds of scenarios anyway. So maybe that's the way to merchandise the problem, where you focus on use cases that are going to work really well and provide high reliability, great connection experiences. Do it with a fixed set of devices if you have to. But I think that's got to be the focus. How do you make the user experience really great?
Yeah, right. So use the high end of the hotspots, if you will, where we're under the right conditions, and then have some sort of policy management in there that can control that, right? Yeah. Another possible or a part of a solution for somebody like Comcast or Charter would have a custom set of smartphones, for the market that are prepared with the right connectivity managers and whatnot, other special technology in there to manage all this for people, right? Do you agree? Would that be an obvious choice for somebody like Comcast to pursue?
Yeah, I mean, that would make a lot of sense. I think starting with a controlled set of devices with good, with good specs, as well as the ability to, engineer the software, the connection management software inside the phones, so that you can ensure that it works well on both the cellular as well as the Wi-Fi networks.
Right. So the last thing maybe I want to touch on a little bit is that one comment that you had when we talked before is that even though not all of the signal on your train ride down from San Francisco to Redwood City might be useful for human communication, so to speak, or video or something like that, which requires a lot of bandwidth and good quality signal and so on. At the lower signal levels, such a network could actually be useful for something like IoT, right?
Yeah, definitely. I think there are a lot of outdoor sort of smart city, industrial IoT kinds of applications that would benefit from having this kind of ubiquitous signal level, even if it's not, very high bandwidth, or even if it's, somewhat delay prone and so forth, it can still be very valuable. So I'm thinking of things like parking meters, or like controlling traffic signals, traffic cams, stuff like that. This kind of network would be a great sort of add-on network or overlay network to support those kinds of things.
So if we're going to make a 2017 prediction, then Comcast and Charter are going to come out with MVNO service. They've already said that there's going to be a Wi-Fi service, presumably. So what are going to be the components? So probably custom smartphones. What else? Connectivity managers would have to be in there, and maybe setting the policy really, really high so that the user experience is the most important thing.
Yeah, I think those would be smart things to do, I would think. And
will they be successful, do you think, in the market with something like this?
Sorry?
Will they be successful in the market with something like this?
Well, if anyone has a chance of making this model work, it's people like Comcast and the MSOs, because they have the motivation, they have this high subscriber density which you need to make this model work, and they have access to the outdoor assets, like mountings, being able to put outdoor access points on strands and in different locations to augment the coverage. So this whole business of making Wi-Fi work outdoors is very hard unless you have all of those pieces together, and these guys. So I'm optimistic that it is.
Yeah. Well, great. It's exciting to have you. I think it's a really cool conversation, and a really cool and interesting study that you did, kind of off the cuff there, riding down on the train. And it's great to have you on the show. And please come back and tell us more, because when you come out of stealth mode, I'm sure you have something brilliant to share with us with your new company. And in the meantime, have a great one. Have a great new year, Chari, and see you next time.
Okay. Happy New Year, Klaus. Thanks again for having me. This was fun.
All right, everybody, that's it for the last show of 2016, at least the last Wi-Fi Now TV show of this year. I've been absolutely delighted having you watch these, and please keep watching. And we're going to be back, of course, in 2017 with lots more great guests from the Wi-Fi industry. So have a great new year, and I will see you again next year. Thank you for watching.
Wi-Fi Now is a production of RCR TV News. To suggest a show topic or to learn more about Wi-Fi Now events, you can reach Claus Hetting at klaus@hettingconsulting.com. To find out more about Wi-Fi Now and all things wireless, visit rcrwireless.com.